Of Speaking Tongues. I'm here today with Pius. Pius is a Cameroonian linguist working at Lacan, a laboratory of the French National Center for Scientific Research that specializes in the study of languages and cultures of Africa. He's also one of the language revitalization mentors of the Endangered Language Project, the ELP. Thank you so much for joining me today, Pius. How are you?
Good, Elle, I'm good. Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's my pleasure to participate in your podcast.
Oh, it's the pleasure is all mine. And I'm so excited to talk to you about your languages and about the work that you do. I like to start each episode with the same question, which is, what is your first language and which languages have you learned to speak?
My first language is Babanki. It's also known as Kejom. And we, the Babanki people, we call it Kejom. So that's the autonym. And I started learning Cameroon Pidgin and then English when I started school at the age of 6. French also, but it came in a bit later when I was in high school and moved to the French-speaking part of Cameroon. I also have some knowledge of other Cameroonian languages. I study a language like Kom, which is quite close to Babanki.
I love that you mentioned that you learned French when you moved to the French speaking part of Cameroon. And this is an
Yeah,
education for me because everything that I've heard about Cameroon is that they are French speaking. And I did not realize that there was a French speaking part and a non-French speaking part. So I learned
yeah.
something from you.
I've heard this from several people. We hear about an English speaking part in Cameroon from me, and it's like it's the first time they're hearing about it. But Cameroon is like a little bit like Canada, but Cameroon is much more bilingual, having been colonized by the English and the French at some point.
Mhm.
So it's one of the like the two bilingual countries, officially bilingual countries in the world, because they have English and French in two separate parts.
Aha. So in between that English and the French part, so you grew up in the English speaking part. So tell us a
Yes.
bit about what languages you were exposed to. Like, were you ever hearing French when you were out and about in your town or in your area, or what languages were you hearing in your community in that part of Cameroon?
Really no French at all.
Okay.
This is clear. There was no French where I grew up. For about 5 years, the first 5 years of my life, I heard and spoke Babanki
Mhm.
at home, and occasionally, very occasionally, I heard Cameroon Pidgin in some parts of Babanki, but this was quite rare when I was growing up. This was a long time ago, in the early 70s. Uh,
Mhm.
from the 80s and the 90s, Cameroon Pidgin began to spread more in Babanki. This was due to the increase in the number of children who went to school. And yeah, and that's where I heard English English was a language of school as I was growing
Okay.
up. And that's the only place where I had contact with English. And out of school, it was Babanki.
I'd love to know about your first language of Babanki. Tell us how the language is constructed and maybe some of the hallmarks of Babanki. Is it tonal or agglutinative? And how are we forming sentences and anything else that you like to talk about to draw attention to Babanki?
Yeah, that's certainly quite demanding as a question. If I Because there are so many things one could say, but I think I'll try to keep it simple
Okay.
and say that Babanki is a Grassfields Bantu language, which is spoken in the northwest region of Cameroon, which is in Central Africa, or sometimes many people know of Cameroon as being in West Africa. So I said Grassfields Bantu, and Grassfields Bantu languages are kind of sister languages to the better known Bantu languages. I think many people know Bantu. Because they are sister to Bantu, Babanki is also a noun class language. This is one thing that is very common in Bantu. And even if Babanki has a smaller number of noun classes, but this is typical because Bantu languages have much more noun classes than Grassfields Bantu.
Okay.
And one interesting thing you get with noun class languages is agreement in noun phrases, which is in some cases alliterative. So in Babanki, for example, if I wanted to say my new bird, I would say Finyine form for FIFA. But if and here you hear a fur everywhere, Finyine form for FIFA, you kind of hear fur everywhere. And if
Mm-hmm.
I said my new chair, I would say que comme que fi que. And there you hear que everywhere.
Oh.
So this agreement is controlled by the noun. And in these examples I just gave you, the noun class markers are fe for bird and que for chair.
Mm-hmm.
And you see these are repeated on subsequent nominal modifiers. So finyine form fe fi fe, that's my new bird. And que comme que fi que, my new chair. I should also say that Babanki is a tone language, like
Uh-huh.
many African languages, so like a majority of African languages, because you can maintain the same consonants and vowels in a word and change only your pitch to have different meanings.
Okay.
So I could say something like with very low pitch, like kumbo, and that would mean bag. But if I said kumbo, raising my pitch on the second part of the word kumbo, then I have madness. Okay, so kumbo with low pitch, kumbo, bag,
Mm-hmm.
kumbo, madness. Okay, so there are many such words in the language where you just change pitch and obtain different meanings.
Mm-hmm.
I could just add like one example. If I say ndong, that is potato. But if I said ndong, that's a cup. Yeah. So just
Oh.
changing the pitch, keeping the same consonants and vowels, changing the pitch and having different meanings.
Mm-hmm.
Also, you talked about greetings. So I could mention that there is a special way we talk about our fun. And the fun is the chief or the king of the Babanki kingdom. It
Mm-hmm.
used to be a kingdom, but now it's a village, administratively speaking. First of all, yeah, maybe one thing I could do, I'll say this in Babanki, mashunto, which translates as let me wash the palace. Let me wash the palace. And I'll
Mm-hmm.
do it. Se mbe. So first of all, I greet my chief. But you notice that I said, let me wash, because I cannot use greet for my phone.
Oh.
Yeah, so I can wash him, but I'll greet ordinary people. So it's kind of figurative. And
Oh,
yeah,
that's
so we
so
speak about
interesting.
our phone. Yeah, yeah. We speak about our phone using specific honorific language.
Mm-hmm.
So the phone, if I sit on a chair, which I call kuku, but my phone sits on kefoin. Okay, so I can't use kuku, which is the common word for chair. I can't use it for where my phone sits. It has to be kefoin. Also, we shake hands amongst us Babanki people when we greet each other. We meet and we shake hands and greet, but no Babanki person can shake the phone's hand. You see? Yeah,
Oh.
and this is kind of common practice in many parts of Africa and even I mean globally to have honorific language and conduct. This
Mm-hmm.
is something quite. So I think these are well, there are several things that stand out, but I think I could mention these for now. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, this is so interesting. Pius, this is
Yeah.
amazing. Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
And I'm
Yeah.
thinking when you said, when you wash,
Yeah.
and that's an indicator of like you're in service to somebody. So that's how you're showing,
Exactly.
right,
Yes. Yeah.
right.
Yeah. Kind of. Yeah.
Man, so much to learn. I want to go back to these noun classes that are alliterative, and I have
Yeah.
a question. Like,
Yeah.
so is it broken down by maybe things that are alive, things that are living like animals or people versus things that are inanimate like chairs and books and things like that? Like how does that
How announced grouped into classes, you
Yeah,
mean? Yeah.
yes.
Yeah. Well, sometimes there are semantic groupings, but it's a system that has evolved a lot, and sometimes it's not really clear cut. Like, okay, if like in Babanki, for example, and typically in Bantu, you have names of persons.
Hmm.
They would all belong to a single class, and their plural forms would belong in another class. You
Okay.
would have like names for animals, they would belong in one class, and their plural forms also in another class. Sometimes you have names for parts of the body, maybe like or extremities, they would belong in one class. You can have trees in another class. But as languages evolve, things come to be mixed up, so such that sometimes you may even see an animal name in the class for people, in the class for or you can see, sometimes you see a mixture. It's hard to have a clear distinction between what is in which class. So sometimes there are semantic criteria, that we use to group nouns into a single class. And then one would need to, depending on the kind of concord agreement that you find on nouns, as I just gave you those examples, then the linguists turn to group the nouns. These groupings are made by linguists. We, the
Mm,
people, we just speak language, and everything is divided up into classes according to some criteria. There are mixtures, and especially sometimes as languages evolve and are endangered, people kind of mix classes. People even mix the Concord system. It has evolved, and it's really hard to say, okay, this is exactly, you can predict lots of things, but sometimes there are mixtures
mm,
which you may not expect.
mhm. Have
Yeah.
you, in the time that you've been researching your language and you've been aware of these, and as a native speaker, this being your
Yeah.
first language, it is different
Yeah.
when you actually speak it versus when you begin to study it. But in this
Yeah.
time that you've been doing this work, have you noticed these changes happening in real time, or maybe
Oh, yeah.
yeah, tell me about
Yeah,
that.
there are, especially like the younger people. If we stay within the noun class system and the agreement which we're talking about, you may see, especially younger people, mix the agreement markers. Okay, so yeah, it's hard for people. So someone could begin with a fur and end up with a cur, or
Mm,
end up with a ter, or end up with some other agreement marker which is not the right one. This, I think it's one of the areas that is quickly affected when people begin to lose a language. They
mhm.
lose the Concord system. I mean, it could be some other thing that is lost, but I've noticed, especially young people, they no longer do agreement the way it's supposed to be done. Yeah.
Yeah.
But also, I should point out that there's non-alliterative agreement. It's
Okay.
not always the case. I
Okay.
chose these examples carefully to make sure you get this alliteration, but also there are cases where you will not find, or if I choose some other modifier, in this case, I chose new as an adjective. If I chose something else, maybe you will not find the same alliterative agreement.
Okay.
So it's not always alliterative. That's first important to know.
So tell me about varieties of Babanki within the language, and how there are distinctions and changes within the language and what you've observed about how people are communicating.
There is first of all, I should say, there are two main settlements that share the Babanki language. Um, the one is Babanki Tungo or Kejom Ketingo, which is my Babanki, and the other is Big Babanki or Kejom Keku. And these two communities are like 20 kilometers apart from each other.
Mhm.
And they've been separated for roughly, I think, around 200 years or so.
Okay.
And yeah, we understand each other perfectly well. There are some minor differences in very few words and sometimes in very few sounds. Um, a good example is the word for cockroach, which has two forms like kefim and kashim. So the
Okay.
fear and the sure are clearly different. Kefim, kashim,
Hmm.
and you hear both versions. You can hear both versions in both villages. Even if Keshim is dominant in Kejom, even within the same village, you hear people who say Kefim and others who say Keshim, and people sometimes wonder which one is the real one, things like that. Yeah, but I think Keshim is more common in Kejom. So also Kejom people, their word for the road is
Hmm.
Keboin, and in my Babanki is G. So Keboin and G, these are clearly different lexical items.
Hmm.
We share not only this language, but also the culture, which is we have identical rituals, we have identical cultural practices, and we really consider ourselves as the same people. We are only divided by geographical location, as I pointed out. And each of the villages has a separate independent fund that is the king.
Oh.
And yeah, and they are recognized by the Cameroon government as two separate villages. And but if there is anything official in one village, there is the equal participation of the leadership of the other village. But you hear these little differences in sounds, which really they are so minor. They are so minor that we don't consider them. I work to Big Babanki, and I don't find any difficulty communicating. I'm home, you know.
Hmm. When you're talking about, and I should have asked this sooner for the listeners, but when you're talking about the grass fields,
Yeah.
and that distinction, what are you referring to?
The Grassfields is it's a geographical location, first
Okay,
of all, in Cameroon, in the western northwest, the west northwest part of Cameroon. It's because Cameroon is it has a forest region, it has savanna region, it has desert part
hmm,
in the northern part, and then this grass-fused savanna part in the northwest and west region.
okay,
And in this region, there are a group of languages that are spoken there, and so linguists started, or they found a term to describe this group of languages as grassfields
I see.
Bantu, because as I said, they are kind of close to Bantu languages. And so the linguists gave this label Grassfields Bantu languages.
Okay. I'm
Yeah.
looking at a map. So are we talking about north of Douala, or are we talking about way north, like
No,
bordering
no,
with
no, north
Chad?
of Douala, north of Douala. Yeah.
Okay, okay.
So that would be to you would say the northwest of Cameroon.
Right. Okay. It helps for me to orient myself looking at a map.
Yeah, 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 yeah,
So with these languages being, or with Babanki and being classified as a grass field,
yeah.
Bantu languages, are there any other languages, either grass field or, well, let's stay there. Are there any other
Mm.
languages that share similarities, and where do we see these similarities?
They are. So I would say there are that many of the Grassfields languages share some similarities with Babanki. In fact, because I've studied Babanki quite a lot, I think it's special in the region. But first, I think it's important to say that there are no less than 70 languages in the Grassfields region. And the Grassfields region we're talking about is roughly the size of Belgium.
Wow.
Yeah, and there are at least 70 languages. By some counts, we can easily go above 120 varieties
Hmm.
in that region. Yeah. And so, as I said earlier, linguists have grouped these languages into two main groups. So, what they call Western and then Eastern Grassfields. Yeah, and in each group, there are several subgroupings. So, in what we call the Western Grassfields, there are again two main groupings called Ring and Momo. And each of these have subgroupings also. You see, there are several languages and they need these kinds of labels to tease them apart.
Hmm.
And ring languages can be East, there are East Ring, West Ring, South Ring, and Central Ring. And Babanki happens to be one of the 7 Central Ring languages.
Okay.
So Babanki is a central ring language along with others 6 others, and all seven languages share much of their vocabulary and some grammar, and in that way are quite similar.
Hmm.
So there are words and grammatical features that are identical, not only in ring or versus Momo, which are in the Western group, but also in Eastern Grassfields, but across Grassfields altogether. So if you look at the languages in the Grassfields area and you look for the word for animal, for example,
Okay.
you would find nyam or nyamma or nyam or nyam. So everything is kind of like the same consonants and maybe the same vowels. Sometimes the tones differ. And there are these little differences that have led linguists to have these groupings and subgroupings and so on, to put those that are closely related in some ways together. So one of the reasons why I said Babanki is special is that although it is a Western Grassfields language,
Hmm.
it even shares at least one important feature with Eastern Grassfields languages. And because I've studied this, I know that the tone of the prefixes of nouns happens to be low in Babanki, as in other Eastern Grassfields languages.
Hmm.
Which this even goes over to Bantu languages themselves, whose noun prefixes are predominantly low. And whereas in several Western Grassfields languages like Babanki, you have noun class prefixes that have high tone.
Okay.
So in that way, Babanki shares that feature with Eastern Grassfields instead of with Western Grassfields. Of course, these are things that have evolved in different kinds of ways over the years, and we're talking somewhere several thousands of years. And so because these languages sometimes they are in contact, there's all kinds of influence that one could think about.
This distinction of being a grassfields language, and I know that I have a lot to learn about Bantu languages in general. And I'm wondering if this distinction of grassfields Bantu, how does it how is it distinct from other groupings of Bantu languages? Like how do
Mhm.
I want to ask this? Like how
Yeah. What
uh
makes Grassfields maybe different from Bantu?
yeah, yeah.
Well, yeah. So as I said, when of course when linguists who studied these languages looked at them, they saw some things that were shared by a group of languages, by several languages. They saw things that were shared. For example, one, they looked maybe at Bantu languages, and they saw like, okay, in this group of languages, you have in Bantu, you have like several noun classes, sometimes 20, 25, so many noun classes. This is typical of Bantu languages.
Okay.
And in many of those noun classes, you have specific noun class markers, for example, which are in many of these Bantu languages are like prefixes. And you would see these prefixes in Bantu, they would all have like a low tone. And then you look at some of the classes, like class 1, class 3, class 9, class 10, and they all have a nasal prefix
Okay.
in the nouns that occur there. Okay, and because linguists see this in a group of more than 500 languages, then they say, okay, and many other features, they say, okay, since these languages share this, let's call them Bantu. And then they go over to the Grassfields area, and they see languages that also have some noun classes, somewhere between, say, 5 and 15, instead of, say, between 10 and 30, like the Bantu. Then you see a group of languages that have fewer noun classes. And then, as I said, you see sometimes they have different kinds of tones on their noun class prefixes. And then even there in the Grassfields area, there are some nouns in those classes, like 1, as I said, 1, 3, 6, 9, which do not have those nasal prefixes that are found in Bantu. Okay, but at the same time, they share lots of the vocabulary. You see that these languages, they actually share the same roots, maybe for some lexical items. And then you say, okay, they look so much like Bantu, but there are these things that make them look quite different. So
Okay.
let's find another word to describe them. And then you heard things like wide Grassfields or semi-Bantu, and then much more commonly Grassfields Bantu. There's even the word Bantoid, like, which is also used to describe those languages that are not fully Bantu.
Yeah.
So it's just the kinds of the little differences that linguists saw among these languages that permit them to group some together and group others together.
Okay. To
Yeah.
me, as a non-linguist, that makes me wonder about mutual intelligibility
Yeah.
among languages. So, do you find that's happening between the Grassfield grouping and other groupings of Bantu languages, or not so much?
I would say there is quite a lot of intelligibility, mutual intelligibility amongst some of those languages, and this you would find especially between those that are closest neighbors. Sometimes I think there is some degree of exposure to other varieties that makes, and as people are exposed to those varieties and they encounter similar words, maybe similar lexical items, encounter similar expressions, similar grammatical forms. They tend to maybe pick them up faster. Okay, so there is quite some similarity between those that are closer to there's quite mutual intelligibility between languages that are geographically closer to one another. But of course, as you go further away, that intelligibility reduces.
Yeah.
It's not like, these again, grammatically speaking, these are separate languages.
Yeah.
Even if they share some lexical items together, those lexical items are not always identical. So it's not like you see the same sounds. Sometimes they have the same root, but the affixes, like their prefixes or suffixes or the things that combine with, they are different. So it's they are completely different languages, and
Mhm.
it's not like someone in the Grassfields, is just automatically able to communicate in several other languages.
Right.
I
Right.
have some knowledge in a few of those that I study, but I wouldn't count them as languages that I speak.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I'm always so fascinated because there are so many languages spoken across the continent of Africa. And I'm just always fascinated by just how many languages we have in such proximity to one another. And
yeah,
it's
yeah.
such a beautiful thing.
Yeah, it's fascinating, especially for people who are interested in languages. Yeah, you're right. And the Grassfields area in particular is one of the most linguistically diverse at least in sub-Saharan Africa. The
Mm,
Grassfields area, as I said, there are just so many languages in that area. Yeah, unfortunately, they are not as vibrant as one would love to see them. They are not as
mm.
vibrant as they used to be for several reasons. I mean, maybe we can talk about this at some point.
Yeah. Yeah. I'd love to know what those reasons are. And I have guesses of my own. Number
Yeah,
one being colonialism.
yeah. The impact of colonialism is overwhelming, and
Mm,
especially because it presented everything. Well, especially not all colonial systems are the same. But what I see in Cameroon is like the colonial system kind of left us with the impression that everything that is ours
mhm.
is not as good as what was the colonial masters.
Yeah.
And of course, this includes language.
Mhm.
And once you talk about language, you also talk about the culture. And so people tend to abandon the language, abandon the cultural practices because somehow these are not good enough,
Mm,
you know. And you see like some young people, which sadly speaking, insinuate that they are not they are not willing and able to learn their language, or to get involved in the traditional things like cultural things and language, but that they are going for the modern things, the English, the French, and so on.
mhm.
And yeah, of course, the problem with many of those languages in Cameroon in particular is that these are not the languages of education.
Right.
So the official languages in Cameroon are English and French,
Yeah.
unfortunately. But the government sees this as languages of unity.
Mhm.
And of course, in respect of the colonial system, these had to be these were imposed as the colonial languages, and so even education is in those languages, and the Cameroonian languages are just restricted to the home
Right.
and immediate community, so that if one wants to have a job, to have good education, to have a job, to be economically successful, they kind of need other languages, and
Right.
so people kind of don't really see any need. Like,
Mhm.
it looks like there's no need. Why should I learn this language when it doesn't do any good? But
Yeah.
yeah, and so that's the one of the reasons why our languages are suffering this kind of loss.
Mhm.
Although I should say that I think there's a lot of awareness these days, I think, and people are thinking more. I see so many people trying to get back to their languages, to their cultures, and so there's hope.
Oh, that's wonderful to hear. It's hard as I can imagine to, have this happen to your own culture and your own language and lineage and heritage. And I sit as an outsider who's interested in language and culture, and I realize that, this is a place of privilege to talk about the language in this way and to feel like I have an opinion on what people should do. But I know it's a very complicated matter. And I'm saying that just to preface that I think it would be wonderful if people could, or people are starting to do both, and both bring their languages outside of their home and recognize that maybe in the current state they do need English or they do need French in order to advance in life, and one does not have to sacrifice for the betterment of the other. So I hope that there's that kind of mentality starting to happen with younger generations.
Yeah, the Cameroonian situation is quite complex, and there are other challenges. There are other issues. There are other political problems. There
Hmm.
is currently war. I mean, people call it the Anglophone crisis, and this has been going on since 2017 or so,
Mm-mm.
and it has led to the displacement of so many Grassfields people, in particular, from
Mm.
their original locations, communities, to mostly French-speaking parts of Cameroon and some over to Nigeria. And this crisis, this war is still going on. And as people leave their community and go far away,
Hmm.
mm, different things can happen to their language, to their
Of
culture,
course. Yeah.
because they go to some new space and they have to survive. They have to learn new languages, or the new language of the area, and they have to engage in different kinds of things, maybe do different kinds of businesses, or other
Hmm.
things that push them further away from their language and their culture. So that is one thing too that complicates things, and
Right.
yeah, that's a sad one, but
Yeah.
I don't think all is lost.
It's not. We always like to stay hopeful for
Yeah.
a better future. Can you tell me where Cameroon Pidgin comes into play and how people use the language and a bit about its origins?
Yeah, Cameroon Pidgin is also, I didn't mention it, but it's one of the languages that has contributed to the problems that Cameroonian languages face.
Uh-oh.
But of course, as you said, languages can cohabit. There's no reason why they shouldn't. But when one language is kind of dominates and pushes out another, then we say there is a problem, right? So to say that Cameroon Pidgin in the literature, you may also see people call it Kamtok. So that's I just say this in case. And I know that it is an English-based pidgin,
Okay.
which kind of evolved around the 15th century with the arrival of the Portuguese to the West African coast. And eventually it was used as a contact and transaction language between Europeans and Africans. And other versions of this pidgin developed in Nigeria, in Ghana, in Sierra Leone, and so on. And then, of course, in Cameroon.
Okay.
And although it's an English-based pidgin, the lexicon of Cameroon pidgin is drawn from other European languages as well. So even like Portuguese. The common example I've always seen is the word for child, which in Cameroon pidgin is pikin.
Hmm.
And Pekin I think, is the word for small in Portuguese.
Yeah.
So Pekin, this is one of the common words we have in Cameroon Pidgin, or even from German, we have the word for pig in Cameroon Pidgin is Schwein,
Oh,
and
yeah.
Schwein. I mean, anyone who knows German knows that it's Schwein.
Fine. Yeah.
You would find also. lexical items in Cameroon Pidgin from French, from other West African languages, and of course from Cameroonian languages.
Hmm.
And this Pidgin, it entered Cameroon through the coast, of course,
Hmm.
and then there are plantations there, and so many people from the northwest region, which is from the Grassfields, part of the
Right.
Grassfields area. Many people from there went to work in the plantations in the southwest, that is not too far from Douala, which you saw in the map.
Hmm.
And then they eventually carried Pidgin with them up to Bamenda in the northwest region, and therefore to Babanki.
Oh,
Right.
okay.
So as I said, when I was growing up in the 70s, it wasn't yet common to hear people speak Cameroon Pidgin in Babanki.
Hmm.
It eventually spread quite rapidly from the 80s and 90s and became more dominant than most languages of Cameroonian origin.
Huh.
That's true across most of the region where, yeah, so many children in semi-urban and urban towns acquire Pidgin from birth, making it their first language.
Now,
And
how did that happen in that specific period? Was there a catalyst for the language spreading so quickly?
I think the spread of education. So many
Okay.
young people started going to school, and this is the language because this is the language of wider communication in the English speaking part of Cameroon, and also even across to French speaking parts of Cameroon. You also hear a lot of pidgin, a lot of Cameroon pidgin. Although the Camfranglais, which you probably know
Hmm.
which is more dominant in the French speaking part, is kind of competing with Cameroon pidgin also among younger people.
Yeah. That was my next question. If the pidgin to the English speaking part is the Cam Franglais to the French speaking part of Cameroon.
Camfranglais is quite recent.
Okay.
Yeah, it's much more recent than so. Camfranglais must have developed maybe like 50 or so years ago. But as I said, pidgin had been there right from the
Long ago.
somewhere the 15th century or so.
Hmm.
So pidgin has been there much longer. Uh, Camfranglais is quite recent. And
Okay.
Camfranglais is kind of constructed from French, well, much more like also pidgin, but a kind of mixture of French, English, Cameroonian languages that
Okay.
young people in that generation started using to construct Camfranglais. Uh, it's now, I mean, because of mobility, there's much more mobility, rural exodus, and so on. You can hear some come from Blair. I mean, if they are French speaking Cameroonians in the English speaking region, you can hear them speak come from Blair.
Hmm.
Otherwise, the pidgin is dominant, much more dominant in English speaking parts and come from Blair in French speaking parts.
Okay. I had no idea Cameroon was so linguistically diverse. And
Oh yeah, it is. It is. So I think it's probably it. So by various counts, Nigeria has like 500 languages,
mhm,
but if you look at the population, which is more than 200 million, and then you Cameroon with about 300 languages for less than 30 million people.
yeah,
You
wow.
see, Cameroon has, I would say, more languages, more density, linguistic diversity than even Nigeria. So
Yeah.
there are a lot. Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. Added to this ones of larger, of wider communication, the
Hmm.
pidgin and the Camfranglais.
Wow. Wow. Ah, this is amazing.
Yeah.
With Babanki, I know being endangered, and you're researching, you're working on your language and sharing about your language and your culture. What are some
Yeah.
of the things that are happening to promote the usage of Babanki and promote the study of it and promote that bringing it out of the home and into the community and into wider communication?
As probably I said also already, the language policy and practice makes it impossible to succeed academically and professionally in Cameroon without these foreign languages. So the local languages do not have any value beyond use in the home and immediate community, and people are forced to abandon them and go for languages with educational, economic, administrative, professional power, and so on. It's unfortunate, for example, that a child begins school and is forced to immediately start learning in a language they do not know, which can be English or French, depending on the part of the country where they find themselves. And this is something I I experienced. You know, as I told you, I was speaking Babanki. I stepped foot in school at the age of 6,
Mm,
and I'm forbidden to use Babanki. I have to learn in English. You know, nobody disrespects people's rights to that level anywhere in the world, but it's common practice in several African countries.
right.
And as we said, it's a direct consequence of colonialism and neo-colonial practices. Although the Cameroon government is aware and has legislation to promote local languages, um, there's legislation to use these languages in school or to teach them in school and things like that. But practical measures are generally insufficient, and the burden is left on the community members themselves.
Mm,
So most communities are doing what they can to promote the use of their languages and cultures, but it's challenging because of the current circumstances. And in Babanki, for example, concerted effort is hard to make. It's quite hard. But I know, for example, that when Babanki people uh, meet, they try to speak Babanki only. So Babanki people find themselves in diaspora in other parts of Cameroon. They usually have a meeting like every once a month. They would gather to discuss village development, to discuss, especially village development.
mhm.
And then they would use the language in their meeting.
Okay.
And so this is one thing that I see is helping, because people usually go with their children to these meetings, and so the children have the opportunity to see parts of the culture, to learn the language, and so on. In the Babanki itself, I kind of had this idea to start a school, which to start a school where children can start learning in Babanki for at least the first 3 years of school, and then eventually transition to learning in English when they would
Yeah.
have taken English as a subject
Hmm.
for at least 3 years. I finished the construction of that school in 2017. And then, as I told you, the war, and
Right.
that war meant that actually what was happening is that schools were closed, and they've been trying to take up gradually, but since the crisis is still on, it's quite difficult.
Mm.
So I only keep being optimistic that things will get better and children will have the opportunity to
Yeah.
learn the language they master before starting school.
Hmm.
I should just add to that I see something among the Babanki people which is quite helpful. There is a WhatsApp group of
Hmm.
more than 1,000 people, 1,000 Babanki people. The official estimates put Babanki at somewhere like 40,000 people, but those are the two villages.
Hmm.
And a group of 1,000 people is not enough, but it's a great place to start. And
Yes.
and in this group there is news from Babanki. There is anything that happens, we see it in the group. People chat in the group. People try to do development activities through the group and so on. So there you see a lot of language and culture happening.
That's tremendous.
And yeah, that can work in favor of the language. And I
Yeah.
think many groups, Cameroonian groups, and I think many African communities have groups like that on WhatsApp.
Mhm.
Social media is helping.
Yeah, that's a great example of how technology and social media can help a language.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
That's wonderful. Now I know that Cameroon is known for some cultural things, and one of my favorite things is makossa, music.
okay,
But I'd love to know, and I know that Cameroon is, their football team is has been and is well known internationally.
yeah.
But I'd love to know what are some cultural things that you would want people to know about Cameroon, either in general or particularly about Babanki people or the Grassfields region. What are some cultural things that stand out that you would want people to know about, and maybe some things that you love or some of your favorite things?
You make me think about food.
Ah, I can always talk about food, so.
But I begin, yeah, you're right about Makossa, you're right about football in particular. I can also add the MMA heavyweight championship. Maybe I think many people now know Francis Ngannou.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, so he's a Grassfields person. So he's from the Grassfields region of Cameroon.
Awesome.
And then, of course, Cameroon, maybe there is, if you just checked online about Grassfields dressing, they have we have this good traditional wares that come from, that identify Grassfields people.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so there is a Grassfields dress, one could say.
Mm-hmm.
And if you've ever seen the Cameroon delegation to, say, the World Cup or to any football activity, you would see them dressed in that Grassfields regalia.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So Cameroon in general is proud of that Grassfields regalia.
Yeah.
And then, as I said, you make me think about food, which is highly diverse.
Mm-hmm.
In Babanki in particular, and other Grassfields villages, you have fufu corn and jama.
Mm.
Fufu corn is from corn, so it's, yeah, paste from corn, and it's eaten with jama. There are various versions of fufu in different parts of Africa.
Yeah.
Some from yams and so on, but
So
those are
this
some
one's made of corn?
from corn, yeah.
Okay.
And and we have achu, we
Mm-hmm.
have ndole, and these are things you hear very easily: ndole, watafufu, and ero, and so on. There's a lot of good food in Cameroon.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because Cameroon, is what we call Africa in miniature. So, like, you can now we even call it now the continent. So most people call Cameroonians now refer to Cameroon as the continent, the continent.
Really?
Yeah, because I mean, you have all these great people, all these great things from there.
Mm-hmm.
We kind of say like anything you can see in other parts of Africa, you can see in Cameroon.
Oh.
It's only in Cameroon you can see languages like
Mm-hmm.
from three of the four large language phyla in Africa.
Wow.
There are four huge language groups in Africa, and in Cameroon, you have languages from three of these. This
Mm-hmm.
is amazing. And then the climate, or you have like tropical rainforest, you have like mountains, you have grasslands, you have desert regions, I think, as I mentioned in the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so Cameroon is an amazing place. The only trouble that is breaking up the system right now, I don't know, is this crisis which I talked about, and
Right.
it's really a shame that no people don't know about this crisis,
Hmm.
or even those who know don't care about it. We don't hear about the conflict the way
Right.
we do about Gaza or
Ukraine.
Ukraine and so on.
Yeah.
The number of people that have died in the Cameroon in the Anglophone crisis in Cameroon is in tens of thousands,
Oh my
and
God.
nobody knows about it. Um, it's a shame to the world system, but that is the way the system is.
Yeah. Yeah. I I'm so sorry for that. First of all, and how it's not only affected your plans, but also affected your people and affected the people of your
Thank you.
country. And I agree with you. We don't hear enough about what's happening in African countries and especially like I'm in the US, I'm in New York City, and I feel like
Yeah,
I hear nothing. And if I want to know something, I have to go out of my way to hear it. And
yeah,
this should be top news. This should be something that
yeah,
we're all as informed about as we are in other parts of the world, and
yeah,
particularly in Europe. And it's devastating because everybody is worthy and valuable of being safe,
yeah,
and being able to support themselves. And um I hope to do that with this show. Like, I hope people will listen to
mm,
my show and
mm,
their empathy will grow and they will
yeah.
become curious about different parts of the world. And
I hope so. Yeah.
yeah, I'm just one person, but I'm trying so hard to do my part to
Oh,
to
yeah, I mean, there are little drops that make an ocean. I mean,
yeah.
if
I love
you do
that.
your part, if others do,
Hmm.
things change.
Yeah. I hope that in spite of this, we can still look at the beauty of Cameroon. And as you said, it being, Africa in miniature.
Yeah.
I think that's so cool. I think that's really,
Mm.
really cool. And I believe, in spite of conflict and everything, we don't want to define a country by its conflicts because, like you said, it's not the fault of the people, and the people there and their culture and their language is beautiful. So,
Yeah.
we're celebrating that in this conversation, and
Yeah.
celebrating that today. I want to take a quick step back because you mentioned a bunch of different foods, but you didn't tell me what they are. Are they meats? Are they vegetables? Are they stews? What are we
Yeah.
having with the corn fufu? You said
Jama Jama. Jama
jema.
Jama is yeah, well, yeah, it's a vegetable that is local. And it's a hallmark of Babanki itself. So the Jama Jama is there are some other villages that grow in Jama Jama, but people go to the market and they look for Babanki in Jama Jama
Mm,
first.
okay.
It's a vegetable that I don't see anything that looks like it. It's Njama Njama. That's how we call it.
Hmm.
And achu is pounded cocoyams,
Oh.
and then they are eaten with what we call yellow soup.
Hmm.
Ndole is bitter leaf. This
Mm.
is how we call it, bitter leaf,
Hmm.
cooked with peanut paste
Hmm.
and eaten with either plantain or even rice or what. So it can be eaten with anything.
Okay.
And then water fufu is made from cassava.
Uh-huh.
So cassava is fermented and eventually made into some paste. There's a long procedure that gets it to some paste that can be eaten, and it's eaten with arrow. And arrow is also local arrow. Yeah. Uh,
This has been such a fun conversation, and I'm so honored that you had some time to chat with me, and it's been a pleasure learning from you, Pius.
well, thank you. Thank you. It's been really a pleasure talking about these things with you. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Let us know what you're working on regarding language revitalization and research, and a little bit about your work with the ELP. And if anyone wants to get in touch with you, and if you're okay with that, of course, let
Mm.
us know where we can find you.
As I said, or maybe as you said at the beginning, I work at Lacan. Lacan is Langage, Langue et Culture d'Afrique. So it's a laboratory of the French National Research Center, and my lab is located in Villejuif near Paris. And I'm trying to document and describe Grassfields Bantu languages as we've been talking all along. And
Mhm.
I've done quite some work on Babanki and related languages. For the ELP, which is the Endangered Languages Project, I joined a great team of language revitalization mentors to work together to connect language revitalization practitioners, which we call champions,
Mhm.
around the world, and to share experiences on language revitalization. It's that kind of field where sometimes people think that they are struggling all alone. They're trying to do things for their language by themselves, and sometimes people just need to talk with people.
Mhm.
And so the ELP set up the language revitalization mentors team to try to be there to support people, to talk with people, share experiences, and listen to people. And so the ELP mentorship program is open to everyone, and anyone interested can simply take an appointment at the ELP website. So you go to the ELP website and you choose to chat with one of the mentors. Nice, very nice people. One thing the ELP also does is that they organize training courses on language revitalization and language documentation. And so I also encourage people to check out the ELP website where they can find more of this, more information about these things.
I will add links to those in the show notes for this episode so that people who are interested in Babanki and they want to get in touch with you, or they want to learn more about your efforts
Yeah.
as a linguist, can get in touch with you right away.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. That would be nice. Yeah.
Terrific.
Thank you.
I like to end each episode on the same question just to have a little bit of fun as we're saying our goodbyes. Do you have any jokes, popular sayings, tongue twisters, cool slang words, idioms, proverbs, words of wisdom, or words of advice in Babanki or Cameroon Pidgin to share and to teach us?
Yeah. I would just like to say this in Babanki.
Mhm.
Nsente di Kejom. Nsente di Kejom. This translates as unity is strength.
Oh.
It's the motto of the Babanki people. So when we Babanki people meet, one person would so if people are seated and one person comes and someone comes in, they would say Ncente, which is the gathering of people seated there. And then the people will respond Di Kedio, and it translates as unity is strength. And
Oh.
I think this has kept us going as a group of people.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Would you
And
mind teaching it to me syllable by syllable so I can learn to say it too?
yes, I
Okay.
think it's easy. You
Okay.
just need to say Nsente,
Nsente,
Nsente.
nsente,
Yeah. If you say Nsente, some other person or people will say Di Kedio.
di kejo,
Yeah, Di Kedio.
insente,
Di Kedio.
di kejo.
Yeah.
And hopefully,
Yeah.
if I run into a Babanki person, I'll have something to say.
Yeah. 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 If someone heard Nsente, they would be happy to tell you Di Kedio, and you go on from there.
That would be so exciting. Pius, this has been a pleasure. to speak with you today, and I've really
My
enjoyed.
pleasure, El. Thank you so
Yeah,
much.
this has been terrific. Before I let you go, just one really quick last question. You
Yeah.
are with another Babanki person, and you've just been having a conversation. You've just been having a conversation for quite some time. Lovely conversation, but you're about to go your separate ways. In Babanki, what is the best way to say goodbye?
Ufangli.
Ufanli,
Ufangli.
Ufanli,
Yeah.
Pius,
Yeah.
Ufanli. Thank you so
Kazong.
much.
Kazong. Kazong is thank you.
Kiz,
Kazong.
Kizom,
Yeah.
Kizom,
Kazong. Yeah.
Ufanli, Kizom,
Kazong. Kazong.
Pius. Thank you so much, and I'll be talking to you soon. New episodes of Speaking Tongues are available every Monday, 7 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and to like and share episodes with other language lovers like ourselves.